Good evening, sports fans. Welcome back to the ChelsChat Podcast, our fourth outing and another week in lockdown. Welcome in JB and myself, Moose, to this podcast. So, Jamie, big news this week. Big news. We're still waiting for that confirmation, which I'm going to caveat a lot of this weekend's podcast around simply being that we don't want to talk too early, but some very exciting news. So I'm going to go straight into that. I think we've got a few different pieces we want to go over this weekend. This being the big one. What's your thoughts? I mean, probably announcing it will be best.
Yeah, I mean, you always have that slight worry in the back of your head, don't you, that the old Willian or Mo Salah kind of thing's going to happen. But no, Timo Werner coming to Chelsea, that's massive news. It looks like it's going to happen.
I don't want to say I predicted it, but if you guys look, 2 weeks ago when we did the run through, that was one of the ones on my list.
It was. But yeah, I think it's a huge move for Chelsea. It's a massive statement of intent, especially given the current circumstances. Everyone looks like they're going to be backing off a little bit, maybe not spending the money. All the talk around Arsenal and Tottenham that they're going to be going for loans and free transfers. So something like this could be, that step to push us ahead and maybe drop a couple of teams out of the top six and make it maybe a top four or a top three. Fingers crossed, and we're putting ourselves in a position to be part of that if there is a kind of breakaway group. And not only that, I mean, you've got to look at the business we've now done, and the window hasn't even started. Ziyech coming in and Werner, all for both of them together for less than 90 million. That is, for what everyone thinks about Marina, that is fantastic business.
Absolutely amazing, because I think sort of reading a lot of articles this week around it, not that I've been excited or anything, but I think it takes me back to a few years ago where we tried to tie up all of our transfers early doors so we could start to build the squad around them. Rather than wait until last minute, you therefore have to try and embed them in. I think sort of if you look at where we've been the last couple of seasons, we've always bought not top players. We've been buying squad players. If I'm going to be honest, you look at the Danny Drinkwaters, sort of the Zappa Costas, the Emersons. Yeah, and they've never made it into the first team. We've not had that marquee signing that stayed. Jorginho, he was never sort of that one that the fans were crying out for. Yeah. Great player. He's done well, and he looks like he's had a good partnership with Kovacic this year. But this year, we've bought first team players. We've bought Timo Werner. Is going to give Tammy a run for his money, but equally, I think they can fit him into a front three. But we're looking in. It's really starting to sort of get exciting again. We've built a squad where Frank has had pretty much everything stacked against him. We've obviously still got the last 9 games of the seasons to go. So, but I don't think there's necessarily anything to prove with him. He wants to get Champions League spot, but he's proved he can build a squad with minimal funds. Build a squad with youth, and he's now been backed by Abramovich and the Chelsea board to go and make an investment in those sorts of areas. He probably looked a little bit frustrated in January because
I think we all were, weren't we?
Sort of Mertens, and he wanted to probably bring Ziyech a bit earlier to sort of bolster the squad for the end of the season, and wasn't backed as much as I think he would have liked. I think sort of personally, I thought it was a masterclass in not bringing too much talent in too early, because we had a good core of young players playing well. Bringing in a marquee signing in January would have maybe rattled a few cages, and equally not given a few opportunities with the likes of Gilmour and stuff like that. But now, if you look into second season and building on top of that, I mean, you couldn't really ask for 2 better signings. And I think, as you quite rightly say, coronavirus has changed the value of players. I don't think you're going to see the signings like we've seen in previous years, like a Neymar or potentially what we've heard around where they may spend, sort of a Real Madrid spending on a new player. I don't think we'll see that sort of money thrown around. I mean, 220 million for a player is ridiculous in any day money, but I'm excited. I've been reading a lot about Werner. I watched him from afar for a number of years, and you've gone, that's a talented player. But even listening to the story of where he's come from, how he's done amazingly well under coaches who back him and believe in him. I mean, the stats he's got are unbelievable. The goals per game that he had in youth game, he had a few shaky years at Stuttgart under poor management, I think is the honest assumption there. But this season, up there with the league's top goal scorers.
Yeah, he's second, isn't he? Just behind Lewandowski. Been banging them in.
And you look at that. I mean, the last couple of seasons, his goals have carried them into the Champions League. I mean, Red Bull Leipzig, not the most loved team in Germany, but for me, I think he's just going to be on fire. 24 years old. We've got the next striker partnership for the next 5-10 years now. I mean, if he can replicate what he's done in Germany here, I've got that feeling he's like that Aguero-like player. That he's going to come in and just adapt, play well, goal scoring, poacher.
I think he's probably the player that we've been looking for a long, long time. We found it in Costa, but obviously things didn't work out there. Clash of personalities with the manager at the time. There was a few potential issues, but I think this really fits into Lampard's 3-year plan that he came up with in his interviews. He went into his interview for Chelsea and said, look, year 1, integrate the youth. We can't buy players. I'm going to integrate the youth. I'm going to bring them in, bed them in, find out where the holes are. Year 2, we're going to be able to buy transfer. We're going to be able to buy some players, bring in some new blood, fill the gaps which we have already found from year 1, which we need to replace. Year 3, win the league. That was his 3-year plan. So next year, maybe we can, be challenging. I don't think we would be looking to actually win the league next year. I think we're still a bit too far behind. But bringing in the players that we've already brought in, plus potentially a couple of extras. Obviously, the left back is that one spot really, which if we only bought one more player for the rest of the summer and it was a left back, then I would still be pretty happy with the business and the squad that we've got.
I mean, if you look at where he's starting to fill those gaps, we've got, I think if you look at players that we're bringing in, and equally it looks as though this is not just going to be a season that we're going to bring in talent, we're probably also going to offload some talent as well. So it looks all but certain that Willian's going to leave us. Disappointed completely. I think he's a player that has been a great steward for us, but he's getting on. I don't think it's necessarily one of those ones, and bringing in some of the talent that we've already fulfilled that gap. We've brought in the talent. We'll probably get rid of Pedro as well, but we've got the talent in the wingers that I'm not too worried about losing. Where we've been really struggling this season and ignoring the defensive gaps we've had is the goal front. I'm just having a look at the top goal scorers this season. So Tammy with 15 goals scored, 162 minutes per goal. Great stats for a young striker. And then it drops. We don't really have that many. So Willian, 7 goals scored, 6 assists.
It's not enough, is it, for
not enough.
The amount of games played for a player of his talent?
Michy Batshuayi, 6 goals scored, and to be honest, those goals haven't come in important games in that many. Then Jorginho, 6 goals scored, 2 assists. I think Jorginho is probably going to be lost off that list. And then Mason Mount, 6 goals scored, 4 assists, and then we dropped down to Pulisic and Marcus Alonso. So we've had a consistent midfield, but I mean, you look
the wingers just haven't been there, have they? They should be, behind Tammy. It should be your Pulisic's or your Hudson-Odois, your Williams, your Pedro's. Maybe not Pedro because he hasn't played that many, but they are the players that should be next in line, and they're not producing. I mean, Pulisic and Hudson-Odoi, they've both had long-term injuries. Pulisic came in, he had a couple of good games, got injured again. I do think he probably will be one of our main men going forward. I think he's still very young. Obviously, Hudson-Odoi is as well, but we're building a very young attacking force now, and they're only going to get better over time. I mean, even just look at Pulisic. He started off, he was a bit too weak. His first few games, he wasn't strong enough. He was getting bullied off the ball. I remember the first game, the 4-0 loss to United. I just remember watching him when he came on, and he was getting bullied off the ball every single time. And I was thinking, Jesus, he needs to toughen up. And he kind of was out of the team for a while. And then when he come back for that Burnley game, he was a different beast. You think, oh yeah, it's only Burnley, but Burnley are one of the most physical teams in the league. So if you can come and score a hat-trick against them, it shows you can compete physically. And he worked on it, and he in that short space of time, he managed to turn that around. Obviously, he's now been injured again, but when the season restarts, I fully expect he'll be starting games. I think he probably got himself to a good point of fitness where he can start joining in.
Yeah, and if I look at sort of Werner coming in, 25 goals, 8 assists. That's pure Bundesliga there. 4 in the Champions League, 2 assists. And that for me is just, that's the sort of numbers. It's the number. That's the numbers I'm expecting from a Chelsea game. I mean, if you look at the cities, the Liverpools definitely, the goals they're scoring per game are way above what we do. I mean, we are scraping through on most games, and that's not saying putting anything off the effort that the guys are putting in. We typically dominate those games, but it just leaves us massively open for sort of an absolute wonder goal from the other, or a defensive mistake, and we're back into sort of struggling to sort of draw a game. We're not outscoring like a Liverpool at the moment.
Yeah,
Liverpool.
I think what these signings are doing is, I mean, you look at the two so far. Ziyech, he can play wide midfield, he can play central midfield, he can play attacking midfield. He's versatile, he can play in many different places. Werner can play wide left, or he can play through the middle. He's bringing in he's bringing versatile players, and I genuinely think he is looking at, not this is my way of playing, like we talked about Sarri last week. He's not looking at this is my way of playing. He's looking at, let's adapt to every game, and we can play a different formation to suit us. We can change formation mid-game to suit the way the game's going, to change things up. And it comes down to the man's intelligence. He's a very intelligent man, and he's putting that to use as a manager. He's thinking tactically, what am I going to do if we're 1-0 down with 10 minutes to go? I can change the formation. I can have 2 up top if I want to, because if we've got Werner and Tammy now, or he can play Werner wide left and stick to that formation, keep Tammy up front, play Werner down the middle. He can play a 4-2-3-1. He can still play 5 at the back if we keep Alonso. The options that he's given himself are incredible, and that's just going to make us more dangerous, because you turn up. If you're in opposition and you turn up to a game against Chelsea, who the hell knows what team you're going to be playing against? Who the hell knows what formation you're coming up against? You can't prepare for that.
Exactly, and equally, it gives us the opportunity to switch those games around for different types of games. You look at Champions League, we may want to go massively strong on sort of an attacking or defensive, and it gives you that flexibility. And I think we've got a really good sort of source of players. Midfield, I mean, I sort of envy Lampard so much because of the talent that sits behind that. You've obviously got a great sort of source of wingers, but that central midfield is going to be hard fought next season. I do not envy being any one of those players, because you're going to have to fight for every game.
And Lampard's going to have to try and decide which one of them he's going to pick. Realistically, unless he plays a diamond, he's going to be playing 3 maximum in that midfield.
Yeah.
Which 3 are you going to pick? Like, it's not easy. You think about like Mason Mount and Loftus-Cheek and Billy Gilmour, 3 youngsters, and they're all top quality. Like Gilmour, obviously, he's only come in for a couple of games, but he looked like he was at that level already. He was good enough. He won. He got man of the match both games. But then behind that, you've still got your Kovacic, your Kante, your Jorginho, and Barkley's there as well. That midfield is ridiculous.
Yeah,
absolutely insane.
For me, if I was going to put our strongest point from this season's performance, and bear in mind, I feel that we're going to lose Jorginho from that pack because I think Juve want him. If they've got the funds to buy him, I think sort of that's a headache that can be taken away from Lampard.
Yeah.
As brilliant as he's had moments, I think he's going to struggle to get game time next season. Just with that talent, as you mentioned there, I think you're going to have a Kovacic, a Kante, just because those two almost write their own place into the starting 11. And I feel it'll be a fight for that last place. I think based on his performance this season, Mason Mount probably earns that right. But I think that'll be a week by week rotation in midfield.
Yeah, I think the Loftus-Cheek, what he can do, that power that he can bring in, that driving through the middle, that's something I think we have been missing because Mount doesn't do that. He's more of a workhorse. He's pestering. He's pressing up high, and he's also good at doing the whole kind of the old Lampard style, arriving in the box at the right time. But Loftus-Cheek is more about kind of running with the ball, just powering through the middle. And I think sometimes this season we've needed someone just to kind of grab it by the horns and go, do you know what? Let's just pump this forward. Let's just run at them and see what happens. And I think he could be very dangerous for us. So it's a massive headache for Lampard what he's going to do.
It's a great headache, though. Great headache to have. Because, I mean, sort of, I think it's brilliant, though, because midfield is probably the most congested part of the field. It also demands the most effort. And it means that he can rest players, or as the season goes on, as you pick up injuries, you're not panicking. You're not panicking at where the next game's going to come, where we're going to fit. Because I think you could take a Kante out and he's had injuries this season, and you could still put a Loftus-Cheek into that mix. And I'm not complaining. I'm obviously always wanting Kante to start because he's an absolute beast. But I mean, he's improving the parts of the squad that have needed things sort of this season. I mean, so far, 51 goals, 1.76 goals per match. That's not good enough in my standards. When you've had 481 shots this season, and I feel like I'm becoming one of our friends here and sort of just laying off stats. But the second point that you can definitely see that we're going to need to go and fix is the defensive. Our defensive record has been woeful this season. Clean sheets,
especially at home.
Clean sheets 6. I mean, if you look back a couple of seasons when effectively Stamford Bridge was the fortress, it was guaranteed a win, no matter who we were playing there. We've had a really poor sort of. We've conceded 39 goals this season, which I think that's been
enough, really.
No. It's a mixture of Kepa. I don't think he's been up to standard this season. I think, and I think sort of we've said it in previous podcasts. I feel he's got that something in him. It's just whether his personality gets in the way of it. I've got a feeling we've got to invest in another keeper as well this season because having Willie as a backup, Willie's 38. That's not sort of goalkeepers can go on a bit, but that's not young by any stretch of the imagination. And one slip up by Kepa and he's out. You've got to rely on a 38-year-old to maintain that sort of record. And defensively, we've been before. And I think sort of from what everyone's seen in the news, Chilwell is the preferred position to go and fix that left back. I think probably, being honest, you're going to write Reece James into sort of the first team more than you're going to see Dave this season. Rudiger writes his own place into that defensive because he is the most solid defender we've got. The left back is a position we've both talked around struggling for. I think It's been quoted at between 60 and 80 million for Chilwell, which in my eyes is probably a bit too high still. He's not a £60 million player. He's an amazing left back. I feel we'll part that money though, just to sort of shore up that part of the defence.
I think anything more than 50 is too high. I think if they come back and said 50 million was the deal, I would say that's a good deal. I think I'd take that. Anything higher, I think there's other options out there which we could, it would still do the same job. It would still fill the same gap. They're just a little bit older, like Tagliafico or Tellez. I think Tagliafico is more likely than Tellez. But I Chilwell fits the mould. He's young and he's English, which is the first two kind of traits you're looking at as a Lampard signing, or as part of the Lampard squad.
Yeah.
I think that's where a lot of the money comes from. Is the young English players. They seem to cost. They have that premium on them. Is he worth more than? I mean, he's probably not even worth 50 million, but he could be eventually, and that's what you've got to kind of think about. I mean, I said at the beginning, I said in the first podcast, I don't think Chilwell is the right player. I think purely because of the transfer fee. I'd be happy to have him. I think he's a massive upgrade on what we've got. But I think that money is better spent elsewhere. And I think someone like Tagliafico, you're looking at 20, 30 million, and Tellez probably about 30 million as well. That gives you an extra, 20 million to pump into another, maybe a backup keeper. You've got to think about these things. We've just already spent 90 million before the transfer window's opened, and while that's very, very good business we've done, that's still 90 million pounds out of the hundreds we've got for Hazard. So
it's a great way to put it.
Essentially, that gives you about 50 million left from the Morata sale. So, I mean, you're going to dump all of that on Chilwell. I mean, I said this to you before. I think left back is probably the only position we desperately need to fill. That's got to be target number one now, especially as we've signed those two players already. But anything else is a luxury to have. If we spend all of that money on one left back, then we're not going to be able to do much else, I don't think.
Yeah, and we've said it. We've gone through sort of who our transfer targets would be. On top of a left back, two positions we still need to fill. I think as much as we've got some great youth to partner with Rudiger in Tomori, Zuma, or Christensen, I don't think they're going to raise. I still feel there's a mistake in all of them. I feel Tomori is probably the most sort of progressive across all of those, and I still feel he's got a mistake in him. That's just because of experience. I think in 2-3 seasons he'll have that experience. So I think there's another centre back for us to have, and definitely a keeper. As much as sort of I talked in previous weeks around the Burnley keeper, I'm now sort of probably more leaning towards Sheffield United's Dean Henderson. Personally, I think he's a better fit. I think he'll become. He's proven top class keeper, and I don't think he'll have as much of a premium attached to him. I think United.
The problem with him is trying to get United to sell him. Bearing in mind he's a Man United player. Would they sell to Chelsea? That's especially considering this season that we're kind of the biggest rivals with them. It's us or them basically for that final fourth spot. And are they going to look at it and think, well, we're also the only two teams that have got money to spend this year, so potentially it could be us and them going for a title in a couple of years' time when this is really starting to have an effect on the cities and Liverpool's, because it's only the two of us and we could be the two fighting for titles in years to come. He's a very young goalkeeper. He could come back to bite them very quickly. So are they really going to be willing to let him go to Chelsea?
And so if obviously we've talked sort of extensively around who we'd like to have. We've also talked around, it looks from the media as if we're also going to have to spend to save initiative. So we're probably going to have to lose some of the. I think dead weights are probably too strong a term, but some of the players.
I think it's very fair to say deadwood is. There's a couple in there that Bakayoko, Drinkwater, to name two. They're 70 million between them we spent on those.
And I don't think we're going to recoup sort of even a fraction of that.
No, not even.
I think sort of Drinkwater, it'll be lucky just to sort of walk away with the contract he's got. Bakayoko, we may be able to do some sort of deal to give him to. I think PSG were sort of looking at him more of as a backup sort of player. But
I think AC Milan were in for him as well. They had him on loan, obviously. So,
but I just the issue is, I think there's only one or two players that we're actually going to get a transfer fee for that we're willing to leave. I think Jorginho is one of them. I think you're going to probably see two players leave, in Willian and Pedro. Both great stewards of the club, given they're all over the last couple of seasons. But yeah, the only other person I can realistically see leaving is Jorginho. I don't think sort of Batchwine might want to leave, considering he's gone further down.
He needs to go. I think he's served his time. He's done what he can, but he would be fourth choice striker for me next season. Werner and Abraham 1 and 2 either way. Obviously Werner could be playing left and Tammy up front, but Werner's also an option up front, and he would be preferred to Giroud as a striker. So you're looking at Batshuayi being fourth choice.
He'd be our League Cup striker, I think, is the honest assumption.
Not even. That would be Giroud. That would. I just can't see a way for Batshuayi to stay. I think he'll be gone as well. Then one of the left backs will probably leave. I'd imagine Emerson.
Yeah.
I would choose Emerson anyway. I would choose.
I think sort of Emerson's had a few sort of pieces there, but on that point, so from we're going to start doing a regular segment on the show, a bit of the transfer sort of tracker. I think, especially during the transfer season, as it is meant to be, even though it's sort of more the start of a mini season,
pre-season.
But if I talk around who we've been associated to, I think Willian looks definitely set to leave. Pedro, I'd probably agree. I'd see Pedro moving either to Japan or the MLS.
It looks like he's actually going to Roma. Roma's.
Oh, really?
That's what I've been reading. Roma is the team that he's being linked with, which I said it's a nice move for him. I think he's still got it. He's not maybe got it at the level that we're expecting, but Serie A, still a decent team. He can go and live for a couple of years in Rome. Be nice for him. And then off to the MLS or something, play for David Beckham in Miami.
Yeah, probably. But if I look at who else we've been targeted, if we ignore the massive talk around Chilwell and Werner at the moment, there is still the looming piece around Jadon Sancho. And an article that was seen in Football London was effectively talking around the benefit if we could entice both of those players. They've had a great relationship when they're younger. I think Jadon equally has had a great relationship with Tammy and a number of other youth players. And I want to get your thoughts, because it's interesting. We've spoken a lot around our admiration for Jadon Sancho. Does sort of our current signings negate the need for him? What are your thoughts on that?
I would say that we don't need him. No, we don't need him. Still like him, obviously, and I still think that if Chelsea saw an opportunity to make that happen at an affordable price, they would take it in a heartbeat. Do I think it's going to happen now? Not really. I think that the Werner signing, it kind of, as we were not going to make too many marquee signings. That's one of them. Ziyech potentially, and that's a big marquee signing. And then I think if Chilwell comes, he would be another marquee signing. Sancho on top of that, you're looking at least 100 million for him. Coronavirus issues, maybe you can bring it down a bit, but I can't see that happening. The other thing is, I think he's only got a couple of years left in his contract at Dortmund now. So I reckon a year down the line, I've got a feeling Sancho, he'll either go to Man United or he'll stay at Dortmund for another year. If he stays at Dortmund for another year, then next summer potentially we could, but I can't see it happening this year now that we've brought in Werner.
Yeah, and I have to agree with you. I think to be honest, if it's going to be, I think that'll be Man United's marquee signing. I don't think he'll do very well there, but I'll happily take that. I think the next one is interesting, and I think he's being touted with pretty much any other club in the Premier League that has got money to spend, is Philippe Coutinho. One of those players that has just not had luck since he's left Liverpool. Massive signing to Barcelona, loaned to Bayern Munich, and has never really hit the ground. I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't think he did amazingly poor at both those, but I don't think he has been able to sort of keep that sort of enthusiasm and sort of the way in which he played at Liverpool was absolutely outstanding. I think it's probably one of the worst mistakes he made. We're now being linked with him. I personally, I'll leave my sort of choice to after I've heard yours, but what are your thoughts on Coutinho?
I would say that if we didn't have Mason Mount, then take him. I mean, I think what I've seen is it's a loan deal that we're being linked with to bring him in, which, we're not really losing out too much. We'd probably have a loan fee to pay for such a big player. But, I mean, he's versatile, but he's versatile in exactly the same way that Mason Mount is. He can play wide left or he can play attacking midfield role. We have Mason Mount to do that, It's not like we're struggling for wingers. It's not like we're struggling for central midfielders. So what is he offering that we don't already have?
Completely agree. And I'd be really disappointed if we went for a player like that. I think he's entering that sort of number 10 role that just doesn't seem to sort of, that central attacking midfielder doesn't seem to exist anymore.
We've got so many players that can play in that position already. Ziyech, Mount, Pulisic. We don't really play with a number 10. We've done it a couple of times, but as I said, we've really got three there. Even Loftus-Cheek can do that role. So it's just not necessary. It's really not.
And then the final two, and I'll take your thoughts on these because both of these are dependent on another player leaving. So the first one being N'Golo Kante with a move away to Real Madrid. I'm not seeing this so much. I've not heard it. Sort of is not sort of the top of the transfer tracker at the moment. But if N'Golo was to leave, the idea would be to bring in Wilfred Ndidi. I think you'd probably see an inflated price coming from Leicester again. And then the second one being, and equally, I'm not too sure who this player is, but Jorginho with a swap transfer with Federico Fernandeschi. One of those players, yeah, as many people know that I struggle with pronunciation.
Just English in general.
Yeah, to be honest, we'll go with that. Both I don't really see happening. I wouldn't be disappointed with Wilfred Ndidi. I just don't think Leicester are going to give him up.
And I also think that we've got Kovacic and we've got Billy Gilmore who can both play in that role. So
I would rather develop one of those players. And
I think we can happily. I mean, not happily when it comes to N'Golo Kante, but we could lose a midfielder and not need to replace him with anyone. Get rid of one of them and bring in a new centre back. Maybe even someone just a bit older, because we've still, as you said, we've got Tomori, and I think Tomori and Zuma. I can't see Christiansen making it now, but I think Tomori and Zuma are still kind of, they could go either way, and I don't want to write either of them off straight away. But someone could come in and kind of guide them for a few years until they are ready. Because Zuma should be ready, but he's not. Tomori, he's borderline. He needs another year or two.
So just interesting, I've seen something pop through on my phone around the Sun have sort of talks around their top players that they think are going to leave Chelsea, a number of which we've already mentioned, so I won't go over those. 2 or 3 that sort of we haven't mentioned being Zuma. So apparently it looks
being
as
linked
though
with Tottenham, isn't he?
Being linked with Tottenham. To be honest, I think I wouldn't be disappointed. I feel like he's been one of those players that I've put a lot of energy into sort of wanting him to be successful. So I'll be disappointed to see him go because I think he has the making of a great player and just never made his way through there. And then the second one being Kepa. They've not named a sort of a team who would be willing to spend the amount of money because we definitely would be looking to recoup that money. But obviously with the fallouts he's had with managers and previous managers, there is always that risk that we just cut our ties. But for £71 million, I feel we need to go and back another goalkeeper just to make sure we're not losing him before we've really given him his proper test. He's not had the greatest stats in the world. He's not been amazing. But I feel there is something there with him. So I feel we'll just bring in competition to keep him on his toes rather than sell him. But yeah, I'd be disappointed with Zuma, but 25 million is what's being quoted. I'd probably take that.
Yeah, I think so. We could invest that in someone else, maybe someone younger, or as I said, someone towards the end of their top days that can come in and guide someone like Tomori. Because I personally think Tomori is more likely to be the one partners really go long term. But we need someone that's going to guide him a little bit and give him that defensive. It's a shame John Terry's not our assistant manager because I think he would be very good at guiding Tomori in the way he needs to go.
And the final one I mentioned, and it was just an interesting one. It's not going to happen based on Werner successfully going through. Was an Aubameyang, which was an interesting one. I was more intrigued just because I knew it would wind up a lot of our Arsenal friends. But I feel that was a dead in the water to start with for a striker that's 31. I didn't see us really sort of going. I mean, we typically sort of old have never given long contracts to strikers. I think you'd still see a significant transfer fee associated to that, even though he is of that age, low contract term. But it was just an interesting one, and it was apparently Petr Cech backing that as a signing.
Former teammate, of course. I think as you said, now we've signed Werner. The forwards kind of sorted. I can't see us bringing in any other attacking style players. I think it would just be defensive now. They'll be looking at.
And then, so not that I'm very excited, but football returning. We have just over 10 days. We will, in 10 days' time, watch our first Premier League game. We will just be sitting down to the Man City Arsenal game, which I'm very excited around. What are your thoughts? I mean, we had to go around the different starting games, but how you started to feel that excitement now? Are you?
It still feels a long way away. It's still not kind of. I think when it's a couple of days away or maybe even a week away, then it's never. Yes, finally this is happening. But yeah, I am looking forward to it. Obviously, we've got a little bit longer to wait for the first Chelsea game. Yeah, we've still got 2 weeks today, but no, I am looking forward to it. It's as we've said before, it's going to be strange behind closed doors, but who cares? We just want to see the boys out there playing and winning games.
What's going to be
if we have an absolute disaster, then I would rather it not happen. But
what's going to be a setup for watching the games? It's sort of you're going to be at home watching it, sort of.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
I'm not going to pubs. It's social distancing is very important. So
I'm
I'll
tempted
be
to take the
couple.
TV out to the garden, relax, watching that.
Couple of cans.
Of course, and it's
of Coke.
For me, I'm just looking forward to it. And I think there was the last thing I wanted to touch on this week. Read a really interesting article around Lukaku. So Lukaku and why he wasn't successful at Chelsea. And it was just really interesting. I had very high expectations. He looked like a perfect fit for Drogba. Just wanted to get your thoughts around why you think it didn't work so well. Was it the management? Was it sort of not giving him enough chances? Was it not sort of bringing that through? And then would you accept him back if you had the opportunity to go and re-sign someone like a Lukaku? Would that be someone you'd want to bring back? Bearing in mind, 17 games, I believe, no goals, and had that fateful penalty saved in the Club World Cup, I believe it was.
No, I think it was the Super Cup.
Yeah, and he never really hit the mark. He had posters of Chelsea growing up. I mean, the stats he had when he was at Anderlecht were frightening. But a player that, personally for me, was going to be the next generation of this club, never really came up. And I've got my own thoughts of why it didn't quite work, but really interesting just to hear those two questions from yourself. Why it didn't work, and would you have him back?
Why it didn't work? Well, obviously he was very raw and very young when he first came in. He stayed for the first season, I believe. Went away on loan to West Brom and then on loan to Everton. He wasn't guaranteed game time. I think he needed to move on. I think we still had some very good strikers. We'd obviously spent an absolute bomb on Torres. They needed to try and make that work. Then you kind of following on from that, I think Costa was obviously the next one in, but I think it overlapped. I can't remember what seasons were which, but I think it was kind of he came back, or he was due to come back just as Costa had kind of come in. So you were thinking, well, he's not going to be the starting striker. So yeah, I think it could have worked. I think it would have been good if we'd loaned him out again as opposed to sold him to Everton. But then even after that, we could have brought him back when he went to United instead. Because it looks like it was going to be Morata to United and Lukaku to Chelsea, and I really think that both of them would have worked in that situation. But Morata and Chelsea just didn't suit. Lukaku and United just didn't suit. So, and especially considering Conte has always wanted to have Lukaku, and he's finally got him now at Inter. But if Conte had got Lukaku in at Chelsea, I think we would have been a very different proposition. Maybe he would still be here. I don't know. I don't know. It's a tough one. It's a shame it didn't work out.
And so, bear in mind that obviously we've now got a different manager, different setup. Obviously, I don't think he would ever leave sort of Inter at the moment. Doing very well there, has adapted well to the Italian league. But given that opportunity, as one of those players, I think when we were both sort of back when we first signed him, 2011, 2012, we were both very excited. As Chelsea fans, you could see pretty much a carbon copy of Drogba, which in any situation I'd more than happy snap your arm off for. He has gone through a tumultuous couple of seasons. He's had some good seasons at West Brom and Everton, some really poor seasons at Man United. But what's your thoughts? Would you take him back at any point? Maybe not now, but in a part of that his career.
No, I don't think so. I think we've moved away from that style of play. Firstly, and also we as we said earlier, we've now got a couple of young strikers who are looking very good. I don't think we'll ever be in a position where we need him unless Tammy becomes the new Batshuayi and just falls off a cliff. I can't see us needing him. The thing is, we always, I think, me and you both, back in the Football Manager days, where I used to sign him as a young Anderlecht 16-year-old or 18-year-old and bring him to Chelsea and make him the next big thing. And when Chelsea signed him, we were like, yes, this is actually happening. Our Football Manager careers are coming true. But it didn't work out that way. And I think it's time to kind of just let that go and wish him all the best. But I don't think he'll ever be a Chelsea player again. He had his opportunity before he went to United, but he chose United.
Yeah, and I think sort of my thoughts on that is I completely sort of echo what you said there. But I think for me, it was the wrong managers. We didn't have a manager who could nurture that sort of talent or recognise that talent. We had a Mourinho. We had managers who were at the point of that game not willing to sort of back a young striker. We'd rather go and invest in a Costa. Don't get me wrong, Costa was an amazing signing, but we'd invested in a Torres, and we at that time had to play Torres. It didn't work out for us. We probably only had that one game that we'd have definitely warranted that sort of money. But for me,
worth every penny.
Oh, it's worth every penny for that. But for me, Lukaku didn't have that manager to back him. He was at the right club, but at the wrong time. And I think he could have worked. It's scary seeing the stats he had in the youth at Anderlecht. Sort of, I think it was 110 goals in something like 80 or 90 appearances. It's absolutely on fire. I mean, it probably did help that he was head and shoulders above every other 16-year-old in that, and probably could have sort of muscled all of them off. But as you rightly said, it was one of those things as a fan coming through, you're going, I can see us being able to recreate Drogba here, and we were still in that point of playing that. And I think I'd equally agree. I don't think he's probably missed the boat now. I think he is now too different to our playing style. He's not that young striker. I'd rather invest in that youth today.
Absolutely.
So I think sort of there's some really exciting stuff to come through. I think we've got some really interesting, hopefully some new stuff that we can bring out next week as well. So some new segments that we've got planned underway, we'll start to introduce. We'll keep the transfer tracker going, and we'll start to track those as we go along through the various sources, making sure we give you guys that news as quickly as we know it. And I think sort of we'll start to do a bit more in-depth review of some of the friendlies that potentially we'll play, some of the internal games we're playing, who we think will start for the first couple of games, and where we think if there are going to be any movers and shakers in the league following the next 9 games. But that's been amazing to have you guys. Really great to sort of see, and looking forward to finally be able to announce Werner as a proper signing. Cheers, guys.
Don't forget to like and subscribe the video. And,
of course, like and subscribe.
And we'll see you all next week.